You pray before bed, but your mind stays awake calculating the mortgage, the car note, the credit cards you promised yourself you'd pay off last year. You've asked God to provide, and He has. You're not homeless, not starving, but you're also not free. There's a weight you carry that has nothing to do with how much you earn and everything to do with how much you owe. You call it responsibility. Scripture calls it something else. Proverbs 22:7 doesn't negotiate. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Not servant, not partner, slave. That word should make you stop. Because if you are bound by obligation to another entity, if your decisions are shaped by what you owe rather than what God has called you to do, then you are not operating in the freedom Christ died to give you. This is not about guilt. This is about reality. You've been told that debt is normal, that it's a tool, that everyone has it. And because the lie has been repeated so often, you've believed it without question. But normal is not the same as biblical. And just because something is common doesn't mean it's harmless. Debt doesn't announce itself as bondage. It whispers convenience. It promises access. It offers relief today while quietly locking tomorrow. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. You can't fully trust God and simultaneously live under the authority of a lender. One will always have the final word. And if your peace depends on making a payment, then your peace is not rooted in God. It's rented from a system that profits from your anxiety. This is the silent fracture most believers carry, but never name. You tithe, you pray, you declare trust, but your nervous system is governed by due dates. Chaos repels blessing. Order attracts it. Stop pretending that the tension you feel is just stress. It's not. It's spiritual misalignment. You are trying to serve two masters, and Jesus already told you how that ends. You can't love both God and money, and debt is simply money with authority over your time, your choices, and your emotional bandwidth. The Bible doesn't treat debt lightly because debt doesn't operate lightly. It reshapes identity. It redefines freedom. It turns the future into collateral. And over time, it trains you to make decisions based not on faith, but on fear of consequence. You stop asking, "What is God leading me to do?" and start asking, "What can I afford?" Those are not the same question. Romans 13:8 is blunt. Owe no one anything except to love each other. Not owe wisely, not owe strategically. Owe nothing. That's not suggestion. It's instruction. And if your life is structured in direct opposition to that instruction, then you need to ask yourself, what have I normalized that God never authorized? This is not about shame. This is about sight. You've been walking in a fog, believing that because you're surviving, you're aligned. But survival and obedience are not synonyms. God didn't design you to merely endure. He created you to steward with clarity, to build with intention, and to operate in freedom that doesn't require a credit score to validate. Write this down. Financial bondage begins the moment you transfer trust from God's provision to borrowed access. You are going to hear something in the next few minutes that you've been taught to dismiss. You've been conditioned to believe that debt is inevitable, that it's part of the Christian journey, that even godly people carry it. But inevitability is a lie designed to keep you compliant. And if you're willing to let Scripture dismantle what culture has built, you'll begin to see that the anxiety you carry isn't circumstantial. It's structural. And structure can be rebuilt. This is not motivation. This is revelation. And what comes next will either confirm what you've always suspected or completely reframe how you see money, faith, and freedom. Stay with this. The reason you're still trapped isn't because you lack discipline. It's because you've been taught to manage debt instead of eliminate it. There's a difference. Management assumes permanence. Elimination demands obedience. And the church has spent decades teaching financial management while ignoring what Scripture actually commands about obligation. Deuteronomy 15:6 makes a promise that most believers have never internalized. For the Lord, your God, will bless you, as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow, and you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you. Read that again. God's design for his people was never borrowing. It was lending, not survival, dominion. The posture of the blessed is not dependence, but provision. If your financial reality is the opposite of this verse, you're not living under a different economy. You're living under a different authority. Here's what no one tells you. Debt doesn't just cost you money, it costs you position. A 2021 study from the American Psychological Association found that 72% of adults report feeling stressed about money, and debt is the leading cause. But stress is just the surface. Beneath it is something more insidious: decision fatigue. When you owe, every choice becomes conditional. Can I afford this? Will this affect my payment? What happens if I lose income? These questions don't sharpen discernment. They erode it. You stop making decisions based on calling and start making them based on capacity to repay. Consider this: a 34-year-old teacher, faithful in giving, consistent in prayer, earns $52,000 a year. She has $18,000 in student loans, a $24,000 car note, and $7,000 across 3 credit cards. She's not irresponsible. She's stuck. Every month, $940 goes to debt before a single dollar is spent on her future. She believes God will provide, but she can't imagine life without payments. So she prays for increase while structurally locked into decrease. Her faith is sincere. Her structure is sabotaging her. Proverbs 6:1-5 doesn't comfort her. It confronts her. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself, for you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep, and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself, like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Notice the language: snared, caught, hand of your neighbor. This is not neutral terminology. This is captivity language. And the solution isn't calm, it's urgent. Go, hasten, plead, save yourself. Scripture treats financial obligation the way you would treat a predator, not as something to tolerate, but as something to escape. Debt is a system governed by laws, spiritual, psychological, and economic. One of those laws is this: what you normalize, you perpetuate. Stop calling it a tool. A tool serves you. Debt uses you. It extracts your future to fund your present. And it does so with interest, literal and emotional. The interest you pay isn't just financial. It's the compound cost of stress, distraction, and diminished agency. You think you're paying back money. You're actually paying back freedom. Understand this clearly. The Bible does not frame debt as wisdom. It frames it as warning. Every passage that mentions borrowing carries weight, caution. or consequence. There is not a single verse that celebrates it, not one that calls it blessed, not one that treats it as neutral. And if Scripture is that consistent and you are that conflicted, then something in your belief system has been compromised by culture, not informed by truth. This rewires everything. Because if debt is not a tool, but a transfer of authority, then the question is no longer, can I afford this payment? The question becomes, who do I want governing my decisions? And that question changes everything. Faith without structure is sentiment. Obedience without action is performance. You can believe God is your provider and still operate under systems that contradict that belief. The issue is not your confession, it's your construction. And if the way you've built your financial life requires debt to function, then you haven't built on rock, you've built on credit. And credit always has conditions. Luke 14:28 asks a question that most believers skip. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? This is not a verse about dreams. This is a verse about discipline. Before you build, you count. Before you commit, you calculate. Before you obligate your future, you assess your present. God does not honor ambition that ignores reality. He honors stewardship that aligns faith with structure. Here's the system you've been avoiding. Money responds to order the same way a garden responds to care. Neglect produces weeds. Intentionality produces fruit. Chaos repels increase. Precision attracts it. If your finances are disorganized, your increase will be too. Not because God is withholding, but because there's nowhere for the blessing to land. A cluttered system cannot sustain multiplication. Stop waiting for a miracle to fix what discipline was designed to address. Start by doing this. Write down every debt you carry. Not approximately, exactly. Name, balance, interest rate, minimum payment. Look at it, because what you refuse to see, you cannot steward, and what you will not steward, God will not entrust you to multiply. Proverbs 21:5 makes the mechanism clear. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Diligence is not effort, it's alignment. It's the deliberate arrangement of resources according to principle, not pressure. Hasty decisions feel like faith when they're actually avoidance. Borrowing often masquerades as trust when it's just impatience with God's timing. Think of it this way. An army does not fight in chaos. It fights in formation. Every soldier knows their position. Every unit knows their objective. Movement is coordinated. Resources are allocated. The battle is won before it's fought because the structure dictates the outcome. Your finances operate the same way. You are not waiting for more income. You are waiting for alignment. And alignment begins when you stop funding disorder with borrowed peace. Money is not emotional. It is mechanical. It follows laws. One of those laws is this: obligation determines priority. If you owe $500 a month in debt payments, that $500 is no longer yours to steward. It's already spoken for. Your tithe, your savings, your generosity, your seed, all of it becomes secondary to what you owe. You think you're managing both, but you're not. You're serving debt first and stewarding God second. And that order is killing your capacity to build. Here's what obedience looks like in structure. You automate your giving before you see your income. You fund your future before you fund your lifestyle. You eliminate debt with the same intensity Scripture commands: urgently, intentionally, completely. Not because debt is sin, but because it is substitution. It substitutes God's provision with man's permission. And every month you make a payment, you are confessing with your wallet that you trust the system more than you trust the source. Write this down. You cannot out-earn poor structure. You can only out-steward it. Stop treating your finances like a burden to manage and start treating them like a weapon to deploy. Because the moment you are debt-free, you are positionally different. You are no longer react to obligation. You respond to opportunity. You are no longer governed by minimums. You are empowered by margin. You don't just survive increase. You steward it. Obedience is not about becoming debt-free so you can finally relax. It's about becoming debt-free so you can finally build. So you can finally give without hesitation. So you can finally respond to God's leading without checking your balance first. This is not about comfort. This is about calling. And calling requires capacity that debt has stolen from you. You are not a victim of your financial reality. You are the architect of your next one. Build accordingly. You are standing at a threshold, not of information, but of decision. What you've heard in the last few minutes is not theory. It's not preference. It's biblical law describing how financial reality operates under the authority of God. And now that you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now that you know it, you are accountable for what you do with it. Ignorance is no longer your excuse. Neutrality is no longer your option. Psalm 37:21 draws a line that most believers have never confronted. The wicked borrows, but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives. Notice what separates the wicked from the righteous in this verse. It's not belief. It's behavior. It's not confession. It's conduct. The righteous are defined by their capacity to give, and that capacity is directly connected to their freedom from obligation. You cannot be generous and in bondage at the same time. One posture cancels the other. This is not about becoming wealthy. This is about becoming free. Free to obey without hesitation. Free to give without calculation. Free to build without permission from a system that profits from your constraint. The life God has called you to cannot be funded by borrowed authority. It can only be sustained by stewarded obedience. Here's what happens when you remain in debt. You pass it on, not just financially, generationally. Your children watch you stress. They absorb your anxiety. They learn that this is how adults live: tired, obligated, and quietly trapped. And when they build their own lives, they replicate the structure you modeled. You don't just carry debt. You transfer the belief that debt is inevitable, that it's normal, that even people who love God live this way. But what if you broke that cycle? What if your obedience became the reset? What if the decision you make today becomes the inheritance your children never have to recover from? This is not just about your peace. This is about your legacy. And legacy is built in the decisions no one sees, but everyone inherits. Freedom attracts favor. Bondage repels blessing. Look at your life right now. Not what you hope it will become, what it actually is. Are you operating in the freedom Scripture describes? Or are you managing a system that Scripture warns against? Be honest. Because the gap between where you are and where God has called you to be is not income. It's obedience. And obedience starts with a decision that most people avoid because it requires them to admit they've been wrong. Stop defending what you've normalized. Start dismantling it. Pay off the smallest debt first. Build momentum, create margin, automate discipline. And as you do, you will feel something shift, not just in your account, in your identity. Because the person who owes nothing answers to no one but God. And that posture changes how you move, how you give, and how you build. Say this out loud, right now. I will not build my future on borrowed peace. I will not fund my calling with obligation. I am not a slave to any lender. I belong to God, and my finances will reflect that. Write that down. Speak it again tomorrow. And then take immediate action. Look at your debts. Make a plan. Cut what needs to be cut. Sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed. And do it with the same urgency Scripture commands, because you are not managing debt. You are escaping captivity. Subscribe to this channel if you want more truth that doesn't apologize for being biblical. Comment below and declare, I choose freedom over convenience. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, not because they're struggling, but because they've normalized the struggle. And then take one action today that moves you closer to the financial freedom God designed you to live in. This is not the end of a video. This is the beginning of your exodus. You've been in bondage long enough. It's time to leave.